So I would like to start with a question to you, and it's in the climate space. So I now prefaced everything with saying how important data is. But what about climate data? Like, where would you go if you want to find out if your government is doing what they are promising in the last elections? Or if you want to get even fancier, where do you find data for your local community or for the city you're living in, or let's say the region? Like, where would you go?
TikTok.
On TikTok. That's what data would you find there?
There's so many people sharing, just like you're sharing now, a lot of what you don't find in regular media. That's really hard to find. I feel like I'm able to connect with direct sources immediately just by being able to research.
I hope everyone could see that or hear that. But yeah, so on TikTok you get very local insights of people that are collecting data in a local setting, and then you can share them on a bigger platform. That is fair. I think another source is the media, where we find a lot of like so much of our news is about climate in an abstract sense. Like, climate pops up in every news show that you find, in every newspaper that gets published every day. There's something on climate. Do you agree with that? But do you feel that this data is really informing you and us as a society? Okay, I see a lot of shaking heads. So like, there's no one who's really saying, yes, I know, I'm informed. We know what is happening in the world. And that's a very big issue, because a lot of the data that we are collecting is subjective. It's very fragmented, it's meant by it's collected by individuals, and it feeds a narrative. Which I agree with the narrative. I've committed my existing life to the cause of climate change. So it is something that I share. But again, if you contrast that against systematic decision making at a broader scale, we have nothing that informs these decisions. Like, if you look at government data, it's data that gets collected by government and they report on their process. And there has been, in the last year, there has been the so-called global stocktake, where every country reported their data and what they have been doing the last 5 years. Do you have an idea of how they are submitting and sharing this data? Like, I can tell you 2/3 of all countries are using Excel-based data infrastructures. They are literally sitting in front of a giant Excel sheet and thinking about, oh, this is how many cars we have in the cars in our country, so yeah, we probably emitted this much. And it's just guesstimating at this point. There's no monitoring, it's all self-reported data. And of course governments like to make themselves look good. I mean, if I would report my own data, I would probably be on the spectrum where my data looks pretty good, as good as I can kind of like gear it up. The same is with companies. We have this ESG reporting, so most big companies are doing their sustainability reporting. So they, once a year, share these giant reports of how amazing they do, and then they have nice pictures of whatever they have been doing good for the world. But there's no systematic integration of all this data. We have no coherent picture of what is going on in the world. We have no global status. We have no website where we can all go and see, oh, this country is doing this compared to this country who's doing this. And then ideally we would have a system also where we can zoom in and see, in this country, this region is doing this good, this region is doing this. And then you would be able to go down to the corporations, to the cities, to the more local settings. But none of this exists. Like, everything in terms of data is fragmented. We can't really make sense of it. And if we try to, there's also the issue of double counting, that a company is reporting that it's doing this in this country, and then this country is also reporting that there are good projects in this country. So there's double counting happening because no one can detract the data from each other. So we're counting good deeds twice, and the terrible ones we maybe don't count at all. So how do we change this? And the answer is technology. We are living in a very exciting time where technology is developing to a degree that has never been at this pace before. And I mean, we had the internet in our lifetime, but currently there's something happening that has never happened before. We are now having Earth observation data where we have satellites flying around like crazy, and they are all doing snapshots on a minute basis, so we can understand what is happening on the Earth's surface to like a resolution of like 5 by 5 meters or something, so which is amazing. We also have satellite drone technology. Like we have so many devices that can collect huge amounts of data and give us an idea of what is happening on this flying rock right now. That again poses a question because we have so much data that it just overwhelms us as humans because we are very bad at handling big data, or we need technological aids to analyze this data. And that's where AI and machine learning are coming in. So we have machine learning algorithms now that can look at satellite data and identify, look at a country and say, oh, this is a car, this is a coal-fired plant, this is a residential area. And based on that and the development of what they can find on the pictures from the satellites, they can much better identify like how many emissions are emitted at the moment. So there's no 5-year reporting delay or something, but we can get closer to real-time information and interpretation of data. And then we can also project that we are, like if we are here right now and if things are going business as usual, we know where we will be in half a year, 2 or 3 years, which is really important if we are coordinating action and if we think about what is happening. And at the moment, we collect data and we know that the data will be published 5 years from now, so the decision makers are already probably in another office or something, and then we can say, whoops, who would have thought that we didn't reach our targets? But if you have real-time data and we can see where we are going, we can be proactive and we can engage and hold people accountable in real time. And the third technology that I'm very excited about is blockchain technology, which enables us new forms of governance and incentivization and monetization of data. I promise I won't get into this, but I just wanted to mention the technology as well, because it is a technology that enables us to do new forms of governance and incentivization, and that is very interesting as well. So what we need to do with these technologies is to make them collaborate, to build systems, and to create a global information layer when it comes to climate data, but more importantly, generally environmental data, so that we can use these data systems for better governance, for better incentivization, for holding actors accountable to their promises. Like everyone is having big climate goals, everyone currently, all the big companies are coming out with their net zero targets saying we will be carbon neutral by 2030, 2040, 2050. And they are so ambitious with these targets because they know that at the moment, like no one can hold them accountable, no one can track them. And same with governments. And I think like on a clothing thought, so like why does this matter so much? Like when I'm looking at climate data, it's very sad at the moment. Like there were recently, I think, 2 women that threw soup at the Mona Lisa. And then there are these movements that we are having right now with Fridays for Futures or something, and I've been marching with them in New York when I was there for the UN convention. And it's beautiful to see so many people care about this. I mean, when I was 18, 19, I had better things to do than marching on the street. So there is a really deep caring, and yeah, they want to do something, but there's also a helplessness associated. So if people think the best action they can do for the planet is to throw soup at the Mona Lisa, we are at a very sad point in time where the energy doesn't find a good outlet of creating something beautiful. So for me, if you can't measure something, you cannot govern it, you cannot find solutions to it, because it becomes always very subjective. And I think that's also why environment and specifically climate has been a very, very political space, because we only have made political decisions so far. Like nothing of it is data driven. And we need to find a common information basis so that we can identify solutions, so that we can give these wonderful young people specifically that are tech natives now ways of creating some solutions to these problems, that they can identify and react to things in a creative spirit, and that we can create a positive energy of where we are envisioning a world from now in 3 or 5 years, of where we're saying like this could be a really nice place where we all have a purpose and we all feel that there is something positive happening again, and we can work actively towards it, rather than throwing soup at the Mona Lisa and just saying like, no, we're done here, we don't want to move forward. So yeah, I hope that was a little bit interesting and stimulated some thoughts. And yeah, happy to answer some questions or also just have a discussion about this. Thank you.
Thank you for your talk and your care and your work. So when it comes to the tech, I want to embrace it on some level, and then there's the other aspect of, you know, okay, we're displacing 7 million people potentially in the Congo or whatever's happening over there, you know, like the mining, even just the, just with Bitcoin alone, you know, I think that there was like this whole, you know, boom of people trying to like extract, you know, and all they're doing is like using energy, and then it's like, it's so hot that they need to like AC their warehouses of mining. And you know, at what point do we even get sustainable with that, where like the future of tech, you know, it's like not only do we not know about like what we have been doing and are doing, but then it's like we are going forward in this way that is very energy intensive. And I find, you know, I just don't have a lot of people to talk to about that on a day-to-day basis. I could talk to Pippa or Stephanie, but you know, we actually tend to talk about like more local issues, like the desal going in over on our other side, or the pesticides being used in this country, stuff like that. But like, have you been, I'm sure you have been thinking about the implications of the tech and the energy usage?
Yeah, I'm used to defend the tech, and I think I don't want to be the person that defends the tech, but I'm used to it. So here's my answer. First of all, I think it's important that we see tech as a social enabler, which we currently don't frame it like this, and we also haven't used technology as a social enabler for a long time. We have used it as a technology that fragments us more by feeding us data that we think, and creates digital echo chambers and everything. So I think also there's like a big risk associated, and historically we haven't been doing great. Although it's also, like, I think if you look at the technology, the internet has been doing amazing, because I can speak to everyone all over the world and share information with them. But then I'm also getting fed things that make me a worse human over time, I believe, because I am in a digital echo chamber, and everyone is, because the algorithm feeds us and reaffirms our belief system based on what we liked before. So this is just to show that I'm seeing tech somewhat critical as well. When it comes to energy consumption, we are like for the system that I outlined, we are using existing infrastructure. So the satellites are flying around anyways. This data is produced by NASA anyways, and like everyone is producing this data already, so there's no extra cost or something. And in fact, we are getting the data for free for the system, because it is already generated. The issue is more getting access to the data. Or something like Google Maps creates more is the best source of environmental data on this planet. It is already collecting all this data, because it needs to know restaurant owner, and like the algorithm needs to know anyways. So if we can use this data for environmental purposes, it's great. We don't have access to it right now, because Google is interested in keeping existing business models intact. But it's all, the data collection is happening already anyways. When we speak about the second technology, about machine learning AI, I mean, we all know ChatGPT, so we know the server farms, we know what they're doing right now and everything. Everyone is okay creating ChatGPT, it's an amazing invention. And the algorithms that we are looking at are magnitudes smaller, because we are just focusing on climate data itself. So if there is definitely like an energy cost associated, but in contrast to what ChatGPT consumes, in contrast to what Netflix is consuming, like and everything else, basically, it's incredibly small. I mean, we wouldn't be able to see it in a global context. And then the third one with blockchain and Bitcoin, we are not looking at Bitcoin as a technology. Bitcoin is its own system, and it serves its purpose as a store of value, but it doesn't work for decentralized system design. So we are looking at more centralized types of blockchain technology. And there, like to give an example, I think the Ethereum network now is consuming as little as 2,500 suburban American houses annually. So it has energy consumption, but it was reduced by 98%, I think, or something. And that is a technology that we would be looking at for such a system, or like energy that is even consuming less. So I don't see energy as an issue. Yeah, in this context, if you kind of like contextualize the potential benefits of what can be had compared to what would be required. Sorry that took a long time, but I thought it's interesting to kind of like layer the different technologies. Yeah.
No, I think that was really helpful, and I appreciate you getting into that because I've asked people before. I have a girlfriend that's like very, very much involved in like the crypto space. She used to go to different conferences, and she had a foundation at some point. Anyways, but I had to ask her, I'm like, well, can you tell me, because she wanted my nonprofit to do something with her. I'm like, well, I can't, you have to like convince me that this isn't going to destroy the world with energy consumption if I'm going to support you, just because like my organization's called Green Wave. I'm like, I have to ask you some questions, and she couldn't really answer them. And it was unfortunate because I think that the work that she was doing and the different projects that she's involved herself in are good, but yeah, it's nice to know, and sometimes it does have to go down to context. It's like, okay, there is an infrastructure already, you're just trying to tap into it. The issues that you have are more political, is what you're kind of saying? I mean, I would think that part of the reason why we're not releasing data is, we would see how hypocritical our governments are. It's like we can say that we're doing something over here, but then we go, have some illegal war like over there, and and if we all saw the big picture, it would, there'd be a lot of problems.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely like a human problem. It's a social problem. It's not a technological problem. We have all the infrastructure in place. I mean it's from a technologically standpoint, it's relatively trivial. We could build a system like this in half a year. But yeah, it comes to to people being able to share their data and to be held accountable in the system, and that hasn't been the case. I mean, when you look at the Paris Agreement in 2015, where all the countries came together and said, yes, we are doing this, we are all contributing to it. This was at the time an incredible success, because never in human history before was such an agreement reach where basically every country in the world would sign off to something. But of course it wasn't made legally binding. There is no accountability mechanism around it. There are no implications for if I miss these targets that I already purposely put incredibly low. Then the mechanism is called naming and shaming. So like based on outdated data, like 5 years later we are calling these parties out and saying, oh, you should have done better the last 5 years. And then they say, oh, we're sorry, we'll do better in the future. And then 5 years later, they're like, Or you can predict what it will be like, but it shows how difficult politically this is to implement. Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't want to call you out, but you had your hand up very long, so I don't know if you...
We can talk later, but do you have any examples of current projects using Ethereum or using smart contracts to get around the whole... do you have any projects that you can name or are aware of that are using Ethereum or a permissionless chain to do this type of work?
Yeah, sure. It's a whole category that's called regenerative finance, or refi. It's kind of like it's based on decentralized finance, so DeFi, and there are like, I don't know, it's an evolving space, but definitely like 50 different projects that are doing the same. The issue is just that they are just using blockchain to use data that is already existing from a centralized entity, like from a carbon offset project, and no one is thinking about the entire system of so-called digital monitoring, reporting, verification of using independent data that is collected globally, AI, and blockchain. So it's just building something on a centralized system that has very limited impact. So there's definitely incredible room for improvement, but there are first applications. And maybe to make it a little bit more tangible, because I realize how abstract it is. So I've been volunteering with the Carl Mogensen Reserve in a different form. But the goal is to think about how can we create different business models. And we spoke about, for example, the cattle industry here, which is barely profitable, and like historically it has been fluctuating, with the collagen industry now providing a more viable business model. But like, what if we can convert this land? We can use satellite data, we can use drone data to document, yes, they are actually rewilding it, they're not just saying it, but they are doing it. Then we use machine learning data to make this interpretation and verification of data cheap, because it's really expensive if you do that manually. That's why these kind of projects are often not viable, because 10% of all the costs are just monitoring on an ongoing basis. And then we can also think about if we use blockchain or not. But that would open the business model for these farmers to create carbon offsets. And like at the moment, as I said, like the cattle industry is barely profitable, but if you would be able to I spoke too long. So if you were able to award these farmers with carbon offsets, that would just turn around the business models for Costa Rican farmers. So if you found a nice, easy way of setting up these projects, they would get paid for just letting their place rewild. And that would change a lot. I mean, and then there are a lot of other industries that are very land consuming and are also, just because like a lot of land is available and relatively cheap, they have a viable business model. But in most cases, like something like carbon offsets, if you were able to allow farmers to adopt these technologies, this business model would be way more lucrative, and for doing nothing and rewilding the nature. So that's the future that I see. And like one thing is to do a pilot at a small scale in a reserve like Karen Morgensen, and then showing the farmers around, oh, this actually works, because it requires trust. Like, people are not just bringing away their cattle and saying, yeah, we will rewild, we will trust this crazy PhD guy that's saying like, this will be good for you. But we need to document that, we need pilots to develop, and then this could be a turnaround, and it could inspire large regional change if we are enabling a new rewilding business model for them. Everyone tired now, going for lunch? Yeah. Oh, another one, that's a sign, I think.